just a few minutes regarding audience assessment, throwing it back over to me for a second. You'll see on your handout what we're talking about there is when you begin to prepare a class, either to write objectives, to write questions, as you think about the approach to that class, maybe even what you put on the walls, you've really got to stop and think about a couple of different things. Some of it's just pretty obvious, but let's go over some of them. The age of the class, okay, the age of the class. Obviously, the way you approach that class, you're going to need manipulatives. You're going to things that they need to hold in their hands, things that they can grasp, things that they can see that are big. You'll even see in our curriculum that in the youngest class, you'll go over the same lesson 3 times in a row so that that sinks in. Different approaches for different age ranges, okay? The knowledge base of that class. What is it that they know and don't know? We're fortunate here in that we don't have, 1 through like 4th grade sitting in the same classroom. We don't have a class for each grade, but we have it small enough to where people can get in there and obviously have the same range of ability to a certain extent. Think about the class that you've got, gender, the abilities of those students. What is it they can and can't do? What's the educational background, perhaps, of some of the kids in your class? Have they, fortunately in this area, I think most people probably have a fairly good education base. So, we may not be talking over their heads, but let's be careful if we have 1 or 2 kids that come in there that maybe are a little behind from an educational standpoint, that we can help them along, or their educational base from a Bible standpoint. Just because they're in the 5th grade doesn't mean that they understand. I'll tell you very quickly, one of the most embarrassing things in my life is, being in a congregation, and I hadn't really gone to church before, and somebody asked me to read from what I read as Psalms. And it was very embarrassing because the kids laughed at me. Now, she didn't mean anything by it, but that at my age level, even though I was at the age level, I didn't have the Bible knowledge base. So keep that in mind. Okay, the history of the group, the hot buttons, what's going on in their lives, probably, that could pertain to any age, but the high school class, some things that are current with them, that could be very important to talk about certain things, that are going on in the world that they may not understand, some things that are going on at school. If you keep in touch with some of those items, it'd be very relevant class as you go through that. So consider why it's important to understand those things, not just from what's going on outside, but also as we take the Bible and we try to teach it to these children and to ourselves. Think about how we might approach some different topics. We wrote down woman at the well and Paul at Athens, and I'll just take the Acts 17 as an example, where Paul was trying to appeal to people who have been having a multi-God approach to this life, a polytheistic approach to this life, and they've been looking at, living a life trying to please many different gods. How you approach that with somebody that's in the 4th grade is going to be completely different than how you'd approach that with somebody that's an adult. That 4th grader may need to see that, the Lord loves people, and Paul is trying to reach out to people in a way that's specific. Maybe in an adult class, what you're trying to get across is, look, he's trying to get them to see that they need to grope and seek God diligently with all their faith, and you can tie in Hebrews to do those sorts of things. So audience assessment. Don't just walk blindly into a class or pull items out of that out of the cabinet and think that it's filled out for you in that sort of a way. You need to think about what you're teaching, okay? And the audience that you're teaching it to. Some of those considerations will affect your objectives and goals that we're going to get into in depth in a few minutes. How much reading is expected, and Ted touched on that a minute ago. I will tell you one thing that will take the air out of a tire on a kid faster than anything is to sit down and see that they've got 12 chapters to read in Genesis. Pick out your, as you write your objective and you make your lesson, target it, okay? Target it. Trust yourself that you're not going to run out of time. Trust yourself. Go that way. Don't go the other way where you put so much on a kid or on an adult that they just don't do it. Because Ted's right. They just won't. They just won't do it. Think about how much reading is expected, the kinds of questions that you ask. They're going to go over those questions in detail, so I'm just going to leave that alone. The in-class activities, along with the discussions that go on. Some classes are more, would probably do a little bit better if you wanted to have some other workshops or things go on in your class. But remember, what we're doing here, we really want it to be focused on the Bible, not just a manipulative or something to fill time just to kill time. That's not what we're trying to get done here. And obviously, what kind of application the students will make. That's what we want to focus on. What kind of application are we?